Hey, John Gilroy here. You pick up your phone, you see all kinds of news about waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. Well, I think it'd be appropriate for me to yank someone out with an expert in that and talk about some of the aspects of identity and waste, fraud, and abuse. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, a podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Donnie Scott. He's the CEO of IDEMIA Public Security North America and head of global strategy, IDEMIA Public Security. Donnie, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, John. Thanks for having me.
I'm sure if I went to Google Trends and did my very sophisticated search and typed in waste, fraud, and abuse, we'd get the old hockey stick here, wouldn't we? Oh, boy, everyone's talking. So you walk into a local coffee shop, you're not talking about football anymore or basketball. It's waste, fraud, and abuse. So it's a hot topic. And
especially around the D.C. area, John. It is a hot topic for sure.
Yeah. And I've talked to so many people about it, and there's all kinds of sophisticated approaches and this and that, but a lot of the nitty-gritty cyber people say, hey, you got to start with identity, okay? Let's start with identity and then worry about that stupid stuff. Let's worry about quantum next year, man. That's how a guy told me that. He said, quantum's fine. Well, let's worry about next year. Let's figure out who the heck Donnie is first before we worry about quantum and Donnie. Huh? So tell me what your company does and how it's positioned to help reduce waste, fraud, and abuse.
I appreciate it, John. It's, identity is one of those marketplaces where everybody seems to play in it, whether you're Microsoft, Google, IDEMIA, Polaroid. We got our start as actually a Polaroid company almost 70 years ago now. So in the great state of California, we had an idea working with our customer to put a photo on an identification card to prove that you had the right to drive in the state of California. And so the pictorial driver's license was born in the mid-50s. And the identity marketplace has grown up since then. In the late 70s, biometrics came along really based around fingerprints. And IDEMIA was the foremost leader in fingerprint identification, working with the FBI and other large jurisdictions around the globe in the late 70s and early 80s. You go through the 2000s, 90s, and 2000s, and facial recognition becomes a topic du jour, and we developed the world's leading algorithm for identifying faces. We can do irises, we can do fingerprints, we can do faces. Largely these days, and particularly where fraud, waste, and abuse is concerned, it's a lot about your digital likeness and marrying up what your identity is. So whether that's a federally issued, a state issued, a locally issued ID, with your biometric to prove who you are for digital transactions. And that is, in essence, identity proofing at its core.
Yeah. And if you study waste, fraud, and abuse, pre-COVID, I certainly have studied it. There seems to be a lot going on in the great state of Florida. And might be that maybe some of the identity systems there may have some challenges and improvement. And I think it's just so obvious that, when you look at the cloud, I've done interviews about the cloud. The cloud this, here's the 6 pillars of cloud strategy. First pillar, identity. Okay, then you go to the DoD. Now we have 7 pillars of cloud. Okay, the first one's identity. So it's really kind of good. So identity proofing is assuring to the world that Donnie Scott is in fact Donnie Scott. So we know that. So then what is identity management?
Well, if you think about you take the federal examples that interact with the U.S. citizens. You have on the federal side knowing that the employee or the contractor is who they say they are. And that can be for simple things like granting access to a building. It can be for more complex things like granting access to a government network or an application within a government network that allows certain user rights to be inherited when they log on. And so the concept of identity management is from inception, the creation of an identity, through its use to the retirement. The person's retired from the government and is no longer an employee. You're able to track the attributes, the authorizations, and the accesses that any one individual has, whether they're an employee, a contractor, or a citizen recipient of benefits from the government.
I was in downtown Washington, D.C. yesterday taking a taxi from point A to point B, and the taxi driver was saying, everyone's back to work. It's crazy here. We can't get anywhere in the mornings. And so from my perspective, it's a traffic problem. From Donnie Scott's perspective is, okay, you waltz in the door. Who are you? It's an identity problem right there, isn't it?
That's exactly right. And so, you have the friction that occurs when you bring large numbers of folks back to a physical workplace that maybe have not been there for a while. I imagine most people go to the building, and if it's the first time since COVID or the first time since the work from home policy has been changed, they go to use their badge at the door and it's expired. And so starts the process of interaction. Historically, it's been with a person, right? It used to be I wanted to go get my badge renewed. I went to a dark, dingy office in the building. I proved who I was and why I was there. I either answered a series of security questions to the person in front of me, showed them a piece of identification, or they looked me up in a system to make sure I was bona fide. What changed during COVID is that process being able to do it remotely and digitally and virtually, because we were banned from seeing each other in person. And largely those processes and improvements around technology have been extended into the workplaces today and are becoming far more normal than they used to for somebody to be able to enroll virtually from their home and then use their likeness when they get to the building at the office.
Yeah, I was the last thing I thought of was identity management going through that traffic yesterday. I was trying to get to my appointment, and it was a real madhouse. But that happens. With human beings, they're going to leave their card at home. The card's going to be expired. It's just the way the human condition is, Donnie. I'd like to say everyone gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning and makes a list and has everything all efficient and shows up early and is real flexible and. Oh, that's not that. They're running from a taxi in a traffic and they forgot their ID and they scream.
And it happens to all of us. And so the speed of identifications moving from, which still is and will largely be, for the next couple of decades, a physical card or a physical book, if you're talking about a passport based identity document. But more and more organizations, they can be commercial based for access to offices, they can be government based with the issuing of digital driver's license. More and more the concepts of being able to take my identification document on my phone and being able to use it to access buildings, to drive a car, to prove I'm of age to enter a bar. More and more we're seeing jurisdictions adopt those technologies because it is very few people forget their phone these days, but it's easy to walk off and leave identification card behind. And that has its own security risks associated with it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it's time to brag. I did my research early this morning. I want to get up early in the morning, did some research, and I type in IDEMIA, and I go recent awards. I go, whoa, wait a minute. IDEMIA awarded a 10-year blanket purchase agreement from the GSA for next generation identity proofing for login.gov. It took 60 years, but I guess you got a reputation, huh?
Well, some things aren't born overnight and earned over long periods of time, helping governments and commercial organizations identify and secure their enterprises. We're very excited about the GSA opportunity. It's a GSA's as a son of a former GSA employee. I've grown up and around the mission of GSA, trying to bring efficiency, topic du jour around government. Across governments, that when we buy once, we can use many and not have to replicate purchases in smaller agencies or organizations. We can really leverage an enterprise capability at scale across government. So we're super excited about the award. We think that the modernization of the identity infrastructure for the federal government is an important place to work, an important place to support. And we believe the technologies we've built will help federal government employees, contractors, and citizens across the U.S. Speed access to systems, benefits, or what have you that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Now, I have a hybrid cloud, private cloud, public cloud. Some people call it alt cloud platforms.
Okay.
And all kinds of things out there. In fact, the first step is identity. There's got to be some commonality of, okay, who are you? We'll let you in the cloud. Fine. Who are you? Really? But it's just that I could do 20 cloud interviews, but the same problem is going to be I should carry the same. I should have you. And our guest today is Donnie talking about identity on the Oracle Cloud, then identity in Salesforce. Then it's the theme.
It is a theme, and it's critically important at the core, whether you're talking about cloud infrastructure and managing the cloud infrastructure, who has rights and accesses to it, whether you're talking about the applications that sit on that cloud infrastructure and who has accesses and the ability to use it, or whether you're talking about, in today's world of fraud, waste, and abuse around government, making sure that the Social Security recipient is who they say they are, and that the money is going to the right person as fast as it can possibly get there. Yeah. And so there's a lot of things in today's political environment that are hot topics that are one end of the spectrum believes this and the other side of the aisle believes that. These digital technologies are one of the places that you really start to see coming together, and both sides of the aisle embracing the technologies. One, because we saw during COVID, it was really difficult for the citizens to physically go somewhere and prove who they were. And you had this large ramp of fraudulent identification activity where people were asserting that they were something they weren't, either a person or had a right to a benefit that they didn't really have the right to. By creating the trust between those two using a digital set of technologies, you can prove who the person is at a very high level of assurance, and then you can speed that benefit to the recipient without the long, friction-filled world of having to take your ID and show it to somebody somewhere. So at the core of virtually any technology trust is identity, and we're trying to make sure that we bridge that trust in a very highly secure, highly assured way.
So, Donnie, there's a coffee shop in Leesburg, Virginia called the Goose Cup. And this afternoon, I think I'm going to waltz in the Goose Cup, and I'm going to try to impress the people that are behind the counter and talk about the Kantara initiative. Because I see this in this press release. I've never heard about a Kantara initiative. So what's the Kantara initiative? Is compliant with NIST, SP 8? So what is that anyway?
You can think about it as the gold seal of approval that what an organization has said they've built is actually what they've built. And it's in line with the compliance standards and policies laid out either through NIST, through FISMA accreditations and certifications or security protocols. It essentially says the set of technologies we built has been audited by a third party. It's in line with all of the guidelines, the recommendations, and the best practices associated with the certification. And therefore, you can trust, right? Another version of trust. You can trust that the product solution that you're getting that has been through this process is what it says it is. So think of it as the gold seal of acceptance and assurance for an identity product.
Are you trying to tell me that the defense industrial base has got 300,000 companies and some of them make representations that aren't completely accurate? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I would never say that, John. And certainly they would never intend to do that or purposely do that. But I would say that the standards and protocols can be complex at times to navigate. And certainly as you're building sets of technologies that rely on other sets of technologies, it's important to make sure that each piece of the pie and each ingredient and each application meets the certifications outlined.
Software developers talk about continuous improvement. And now people doing user interface for federal websites talking about continuous improvement. And so I'm going to toss to you, Donnie. Okay, so we know you're a good company, been around since forever, have the Kantara initiative, so you are what you say you are. And guess what? Artificial intelligence, quantum, these are real things that are changing all the time. So how are you positioning yourself to keep pace with this rapid change in our world?
The world is changing rapidly, John. That is for sure. If you take any one of those slices, for identity, we've been at the forefront of trying to lead the industry and the product evolution and the advancement and support of our customers' missions across our existence. And so for us, the adoption of our digital technologies for identification was really born out of largely the law enforcement use cases. We built a set of biometric technologies that at the end of the day were responsible for helping our law enforcement customers either convict somebody or set them free based on identification of who they are, primarily fingerprints. And so you take that same set of high standards of due diligence in terms of following the chain of custody evidence and being able to prove through how you solve those problems and how you identify who that person is. And then you start to extend them into the adoption of today's technology. So about a decade ago, we started using the advanced algorithms that Google and others were creating to leverage artificial intelligence and to leverage cognitive computing and other things to improve our algorithms. What that means for the layperson was we used to have a bunch of PhDs that would sit around solving math problems of how to identify people. And now we have those smart PhDs target computers to do the same thing, and they could do it faster and better than people could. Today, we're starting to see these large language models, and the use of them be adopted across the marketplace. It doesn't matter whether you're talking to farm equipment manufacturers, the federal government, defense systems makers. or social media companies. They're all trying to make huge investments and advancements in how they leverage those technologies for their benefit. I'd say in the identity space, for us, it's really about making it easier and simpler for our customers to use the technologies and deploy them into their environments. We won't see a huge pickup in the performance of our algorithms through large language models, but we will see better documentation, simpler ease of use, faster deployment through the use of the technologies into customers' environments, which is all really good. So, our state of the state is, if you look at the future side of it, we're working on solving the post-quantum encryption problem so that we can protect the sensitive identity information that are within our government's user systems or within our commercial enterprise systems. But for us today, it's really about leveraging the technologies to make them more widely available to citizens, to our customers, and to their employees, so that they can speed their way back to work when we're coming back to the office. They can make sure that they're logging on with the correct accesses to the systems and applications that they use at the office. And at the end of the day, they're able to speed that benefit to the citizen that's applied for temporary need and assistance.
So I'm going to use a phrase that's going to impress somebody. I don't know who, but there is trending conversations in this town about something called agents and agentic AI, and different automated systems doing different things. There's got to be identity involved in a non-human system too. I mean, if you have an agent doing a research for you on something, they have to be able to identify to have access. Are we talking two complete topics here?
No, I think they're overlays of concentric circles, John. In the end, you have to know who the person is, right, or who the agent is. And so if you have an agentless research product, that has provenance of where that information's blamed, built off of, improved upon, sourced. And so through that, you're tracking identity of who the source document is, who the user requester is, how that gets put together with other pieces of information to form an outcome. At the core of virtually any computing process, there's some nugget of identity that's critical. And that's from the simple log on to a system, the simple use of what that system does and generates an output to, and then who that can be shared with through time. So I think there's certainly an identity element core in virtually every digital transaction that occurs.
And so your company does not look at anomalous behavior on the system itself. Your company starts with just giving a person validation or authentication that they have access to the system. And then other organizations, it's a handoff to them because you can't do everything. And so you know what your lane is, you work your lane, you've had success with it. And there's other topics you are aware of, but those are almost separate topics, aren't they?
Yeah, that's 100% spot on. At the core of what we do, we're a biometrics company that builds identity technologies. And so in that, other organizations use our technologies at the core of what they do to look for anomalous cyber behavior or rogue users or accesses or insider threats or what have you. We're not the builder of insider threat technologies. We're the builder of technologies that an insider threat cybersecurity company could use to actually identify who that person is. And I literally mean identify, right? The features, the likeness of that person's both physical presence, so their fingerprints, their face, their irises, the things that make them uniquely them, as well as once those are asserted into a digital form, a token, an identity piece of software that sits on a card, that sits on a chip, that sits on a USB token. When the creation of the physical is made into the digital, we build the technologies to allow that assertion and identification to occur at a very high level. And then other people take what we built and use them to do anomalous detection, to lock down networks, to allow people to enter a building or what have you.
So what companies do you typically partner with in projects?
If you look at the spectrum and you look at the spectrum of companies that are in the identity space, it's everybody. So it's the large technology providers of the world. Think the cloud providers. Think the folks that build applications, the social media companies. Think your folks that do, March Madness is upon us today. Here in a couple hours, the games will tip off. You hear from DraftKings, from MGM, from all the big sports gambling houses. That's going to be a very big week for them in their business. We help them make sure that the customer on the other end of that bet is who they say they are, that they're legally entitled to the bet, that it's not my 14-year-old upstairs who's 15-year-old who's not allowed to place a bet on the game, that it's actually a 18 or 21-year-old in a jurisdiction that allows to do it. So it's the cloud system providers, it's the large technology integrators, and it's everybody that wants to know who the person is on the other side of that device, whether that's an Uber delivery driver, a controlled substance delivery person, or a sports gambling house.
Yeah. So, Donnie, you're looking at a 10-year BA here. So how do you think 5 years from now, okay, let's time travel 5, 6 years from now. How do you think identity has changed, and what do you think there might be some pop-up surprises?
Yeah, I think the most prevalent folks will see is we're about a third of the way-ish in the U.S. through the adoption, somewhere between a quarter and a third, the adoption of mobile ID and mobile driver's license. So folks will be able to, here in Virginia, we have the technology. Other states are rolling it out this year, next year, the year after. But I believe at the end of the 5-year period, you'll be able to get a digital driver's license in virtually or any jurisdiction across North America. And one end of that is enabling you to drive without your physical license, which is a convenience to those of us that sometimes leave our wallets at home, but always have our phones with us. But at the other end of that, it's being able to share only what you want and need to share with whom you want to share it. And I'll give you a couple just kind of, top of the mind use cases that are important. My daughter's going to be off to college next year. There are places that are 18 and over or 21 and older where you have to prove your age to enter the establishment. I don't really love the fact that when you show somebody your identification card, on it has your home address, your name, your birth date, it has sensitive information about you. The digital technologies allow you just that you're age certified. So she'll be able to hold up and they'll be able to scan with the other side of the device, either through QR code or through Bluetooth enablement connection between the two. She'll be able to prove that she's 18 without actually sharing with the person where she lives, what her name is, because they don't really need to know that. And so in that, if we have this largely set of adopted technologies that now exist on our phone, you'll start to see a much higher level of our ability to prove who we are when we want to do a digital transaction. And so instead of today's use case of, I want to do a digital transaction, I'm sent a 6-digit PIN on my, texted a 6-digit PIN on my phone. I'm going to enter that 6-digit phone and supposedly that's secure. The next version of that will be, I want to do a digital transaction. That could be filing my taxes. That could be, I want to buy a house. That could be, I want to get a loan for a car. And instead of a 6-digit PIN that could be secure, I'll actually show my face to the phone. The phone will then match the two that have been created together. And the shared level of who I am and my high level of assurance and identity will then pass through the digital ecosystem and enable that digital transaction to occur at a much higher level of assurance. And so the fabric of digital IDs and digital driver's license will really enable a very higher level of security and assurance to occur in the digital ecosystem once virtually everybody carries those on their device. And so that's kind of the 5-year vision, right? Is this large-scale adoption of digital technologies on the phone, and then we'll start using them where we've historically had to pull out our driver's license or share some piece of information that's emailed to us, that's mailed to us, or that's texted to us that's not as secure as a biometric transaction of trust.
Yeah, it's a 60-year view you just presented there. It's like, we have the basics here, and I'm glad it's not snap a finger, because nothing is snap a finger, and slowly over a long period of time, and all of a sudden then if you get attacked, all of a sudden you have a better way to defend yourself than just getting on the phone with a credit card company and crying or whatever. I don't know what people do when they get attacked. They get attacked every day.
Every day.
You know that, Donnie. Every day people get their credit cards taken, and people don't know what to do.
No, and you've started to see the improvement of those technology, and it really is. I mean, it's the right way to frame it, John. It's really 60, 70 years of really hard work in 2 or 3 different areas. One, on the core identity card and the creation of its digital likeness. The second is really around the biometrics, face, fingerprint, and the ability to match those at a very high level of connective tissue. And then the third is to build those and assemble those technologies in such a way that people can use them for what they want to use them for, whether it's building a better application, making sure that the driver of my Uber is the correct driver and I'm not going to be abducted, or that you're going through a background check with a federal agency to show up to work next week and proving who you are and at a very high level. And so if you think of those 3 areas, it's taken us a long time to get here, but we will see the fairly rapid adoption and ability to use those over the next 5 to 10 years. That said, I still think we're going to be in this physical and digital identity world for a long period of time. I couldn't imagine in the next decade, I would really want to leave the United States without my physical passport, even if I do have a digital passport likeness. just in case my phone dies at a foreign point of entry and I can't prove who I say I am. So I think we'll be in this physical and digital world for some time. But the ease and the high level of assurance that you'll get from digital identification will certainly make things better for folks. And we should see a significant reduction in fraud, waste, and abuse, not just of government services and dollars, but of our own as we do commercial transactions as well.
And if you want more information, what I'll do is you can go to federaltechpodcast.com, look up Interview 230, and I'll have a link to IDEMIA's website, and you can get more information about them. But an overnight success, 60-year overnight success.
An overnight success, 60
overnight
years in the
success.
making. That's right. na.idemia.com. You can see the North American website.
Yeah, we'll put it up there for the folks to get to. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Donnie Scott, CEO of IDEMIA, Public Security North America, and head of Global Strategy, IDEMIA Public Security. Thanks, Donnie.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate it.